Welcome to the World Builders Anvil, Season 3, Episode 7. Beep says Jeff to the big green toad.
Don't know where to start building your fantasy world?
Do you need more? Does it make sense?
Forget any worries and become a crafter of imagination.
This is the place where we will prime your mind.
Now, it's time to heat up the forge.
Break out the mithril ingots and hammer.
Welcome to the World Builders Anvil. I'm Jeffrey W. Ingram.
And I'm Michael Miller.
Let's sup from the muck of Java and build.
Welcome back, as always, and my name is Jeff Ingram, and as you can tell, we'll be building a frog character today.
Beep, beep, Jeff. Beep, beep.
Beep, beep, beep. That's right. It says little blue truck.
That would make you the big green toad.
That's true. I'm a toady, I've been told. But yes. We are here starting to build a character finally. It's episode 7 in our season about characters, and we get to start building them. But we've gone to the framework. We've talked about the meta questions that you should talk about, some extended ones. And we've talked about more in-depth things that you should talk about, which we'll probably need to do for this character. Protagonists, as most people know, are kind of important characters to stories. And in a way, from where we've been going, there might be kind of a dual protagonist as well, but that's a plot twist in the story, if it's true. Someone from the other side, but this is actually the lead character of the story, without a doubt. It is our frog, technically, who has never attacked me in my garage, unlike a tree frog that viciously jumped on my arm when I was trying to get him out of my garage.
I don't know how you made it out alive. Jeff told me the story. It was harrowing. Tree frogs can be savage little reptiles. You got to be, or I'm sorry.
Luckily, I live in Florida. I shoved my arm into a gator's mouth and he bit and ripped the frog off. Luckily.
Yeah, he knew.
He knew. He's my buddy, obviously.
Yeah.
Now,
if I don't get
you
this
should not try that in your home if you have a gator.
Or anywhere else.
Or anywhere else. Do not actually put your arm in the mouth of a gator. That would be really dumb, kind of like the story. But yeah. But the simple fact is, yes, we're starting to build our frog character today. Now, typically, I build top down, especially in the instance of cultures. Cultures really fascinate me. And cultures are kind of essential to characters. And they're related to characters, obviously. Characters are informed by a culture. Now, I don't believe characters have to act within the bounds of the culture they belong to, but you kind of need to know if they do and how far off they are from the cultural ideal. That's kind of the way I like to think about it. Because a culture is kind of an ideal set of beliefs that a culture has. And ideal, I mean, it's what they believe it should be, not necessarily good or bad. But so later on, when we actually build the culture, I'll have to reverse it and sit there and look at this character and go, okay, is this character mainstream frog culture? Yes or no? And if no, then I have a lot of wiggle room with how to build the culture still. But if he is mainstream, then I'm kind of starting to like, okay, some of his traits, his beliefs, the way he acts, his motivations are informed by his culture, which they will be either way. But the question is it the reflective of the culture? So it's really kind of an important, so we'll just move on.
I mean, it's kind of interesting when you have a character whose perspectives and basis of a belief are counter to their culture. You get a unique personality in that regard. But I mean, it happens all the time, right? You got people who are like, I was raised in a strict fundamentalist Christian household, but I don't believe in Jesus Christ. It's like, oh, okay, but how did that happen? Or people raised in communism who can't wait to get to a capitalistic system. You know what I mean? Whatever it may be.
Or the funny one is really, it's religion is a great example of this, because so many people consider themselves religious, and typically they consider the way they are raised to be the correct version of the religion that they are.
Yep.
And so you get people who are religious who go, oh, you're not Christian if you don't agree the way. And not all Christians are like that, don't get me wrong, but there are some who definitely go that way. And there are atheists who tell Christians that they're not real Christians, and Christians who tell atheists they're not real atheists. It's very funny how it works. But we are human, so.
How do you define religious? Is religious a person who is spiritual and, very much believes in a god, or is or is that just someone who's spiritual, or is someone religious if they make it a point to stringently practice a religion?
Stringently practice a religion.
That's how I would define it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But by that definition, that doesn't necessarily mean that you believe in God or that you are spiritual at all. It just means that you're following a way of life.
Yeah, but
I'm not saying you can't be both, but I'm just pointing out a distinction that
I know people who are religious who aren't very spiritual, and I know people who are spiritual who aren't religious or very religious.
Yes, I have been all across the spectrum throughout my life. There was a point in time when I was not religious or spiritual. There was a point in time when I was religious and not spiritual. There was a point in time when I was very spiritual, and a point in time when I was very spiritual and religious. So
I think that's a normal journey for most people if you're in a society that allows it.
Well, I was just
at least openly to talk about it. Where some societies we probably would have still had the journey, we just wouldn't talk about it. At least not in a podcast episode. But yeah. Yes, but so this episode we want to get into the meta questions of the character, sort of the big picture questions, and then there'd be probably a couple I tag it on at the end to help me later on as a cheat sheet later on when we actually build the culture, because this is really, I don't know if this is the only frog character we'll be building up front, because there's at least 2 lizard characters we need to build. And,
2? I mean, I imagine there's a few more then, but what 2 are you specifically thinking of? Obviously,
one is
the antagonist.
One is the perceived antagonist at the beginning, the enemy general leading the army.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
And then the actual antagonist. Because you have to have plot twists that people don't see coming when you use really common tropes. I don't know how people don't see them coming, but, hey, that's the way it rolls.
I do. I'm terrible to watch a movie with.
So I'm going to say they, but now they, in this instance, will always be the character. So if I accidentally say they, I'm just going off the old meta questions that we did in episode 2, I believe. So you go into episode 2 to look at those. They'll be in the show notes as well, too. So the basic meta questions are, who are they? And fundamentally at the big picture level. Now, I'm not a fan of purity and archetypes, but I like to understand the tropes I'm using, the archetypes I'm using. And a lot of times you get bad information from people that say, stay away and avoid certain tropes, because they're overused. And maybe that's true, but typically they're overused because they're patterns people are really familiar with and latch onto and spend money on. So, my thing is I always like to have angles.
I think that's a really important thing that you mentioned there, that not only is it something that people identify with and latch onto, but they will spend money on it. I think that's a really...
There's a reason why, for me, I see this frog character. We'll call him Big Green Toad.
I thought we actually gave him a name, no?
I don't remember. That was
there might be a note somewhere that has his name. We'll have to take.
But remember, we've not developed the language yet, so he can't technically have a name.
I was about to say, I don't intend to develop a frog language. That's on you.
Oh, we'll have an episode on it.
I'm sure you will, but that's something I'm going to need.
But I would give people the ultimate.
You know more about developing language than I do.
But I'll give people the ultimate cheat sheet to do that. So anyone will be able to develop a language in under an hour.
Really?
A very well developed language, but I won't do that here today. And if you search the internet, you couldn't possibly figure it out. So don't.
I assume that you have like a website or an app or something.
There's an app. There's an app for it.
There's an app.
I can't remember the name of it, unfortunately. I've used it, and all my future languages. I have books, really good books on how to develop like languages for which helped me. And I grew up not learning phonics, so I'm like the worst case example of someone who should consider building a language. But I love language, so I love John Wartner on great courses. So yeah, I'm a geek. No one who's heard this would think.
Shocker.
So I see this guy as a chosen one character.
Well, yeah, but I also thought we talked about him being the everyman as well. Yes.
But he's the everyman who happens to be the chosen one, but at least the priest class does not accept What to the chosen one?
Well, all right. Let's make a couple of very important decisions right here.
Mm-hmm. And this is the one we have to for this character. Yes.
One, my opinion is that he doesn't know, or even if and when he finds out, doesn't believe that that he is a chosen one.
I absolutely agree with that.
Okay, or at least not until the late game. Yeah, you know.
Yeah, and that's typically a chosen one. I think storyline too, right? Where it's like no, and then all of a sudden you're at some point like, oh, okay, I just blew fire from my butt. All right, maybe there's something.
No, I'm sorry, Trinity. It's not true. Oracle was wrong.
That's right. Sorry, Trinity. What would Trinity know?
But now I believe in something. I believe we can get him back.
Are you trying to claim that the Matrix had a chosen one character? Yes, it did.
Yeah, in that they straight up say that in the movie.
You're the chosen one.
Actually, wait, they call him the one. Mm-hmm. It's in Star Wars they call him the chosen one.
Oh, okay. So I think he is the chosen one, but more importantly, and this is where I kind of use archetypes to create hybrids, is what I like to call it, right? So it's like, this is a chosen one archetype where he is predestined to do things. People don't like to be predestined typically. I don't know if that's true because culturally that could be the opposite here. But I love the everyman trope even better. And actually from a reading standpoint, I'm not a huge fan of the chosen one. It works really good in games when I play because then I feel really powerful every time I replay Oblivion.
Well, and you're always the most important person in the room.
Yeah. And I'm used to that. So it just doesn't feel right if I get treated any other way. So, but yeah. So he's the chosen one, but we'll play him as an everyman. And it's very important because, and we talked about this before, and we'll get back to this when we actually built the culture out. I want to go back and re-listen to that episode where we started to rough draft out ideas for the culture last season, I believe.
My question was incomplete though, because it's kind of multi-layered, right? Or multi-stage. Like one,
yes.
Does he know that he's the chosen one? Two, does the governing religious body have an inkling that he's the chosen one and they just choose to refute it, or they don't believe it at all?
I think very early they know. But the thing is, they realize that fundamentally what they thought was going to happen, with the chosen one. Now, this is an idea I got from taking catechism and all kinds of religious classes or whatever. At least one of the modern interpretations, I don't know how far back it goes, is the idea that Jesus being the chosen one, essentially there was a group of people who thought the chosen one meant bringing back the kingdom of Israel. And Jesus obviously did not do that. So he was the chosen one, but in a different way to save souls, not save the people of Israel. Now, so I think the idea I like here is that the priests have the idea that the chosen one is supposed to come and save their jobs, to put it in a very cold, blunt way, and reinforce their authority. But they realize very early with who it is, not being of their class, that the ultimate class here is the religious class. He's not one of them. I think we said a farmer. He's a lay person. He's at the bottom of the social pecking order. It's going to disrupt their society, even as it saves them. So they're not going to want him to do his thing the way they want to. There'll probably be some efforts to guide him to do it the right way. Mm. And ultimately, I think if they feel like they're losing control, they will turn on him and try and kill him. Their loss of power, they might still be able to defeat the lizard people without him in their minds, or they need to believe. But he's not saving the frog people in the right way. So ultimately, he's a villain to the priest class. I like that because I like the idea where people in charge are corrupt, because that's pretty much what I believe in general. People who are in charge, it's not that they're bad people. They see what they're doing is typically right and for the good. And when that doesn't always line up with what people actually need, and because they're rulers, they don't necessarily understand what the everyman needs. But the everyman, guess what he knows? He knows what he needs, his family needs, his friends need. So typically there's a clash of ideas there. So you get sort of a little class sort of struggle there, which is interesting always as well, because that's, I think, a theme people like to talk about. So I think he's an everyman. I don't think he'd even want to admit to being a chosen one. I think that the arrogance you'd have to be like, yes, I'm the chosen one, so go serve me that cup of coffee. You have to be an arrogant prat, sort of the way I sound whenever I claim to be one.
Wasn't there, I seem to remember us having a very distinct conversation about farming for peace.
As his method of trying to save people.
Yeah, but I don't remember how.
We're going to go back and listen to that. That's not necessarily,
yeah.
But I know that's the idea of where he's a farmer came from. So I want to go back and listen to that episode again. But that's not necessarily relevant to this discussion, though, because one, this is where we're making the character decisions of who the character is, and then you just take a hammer and make the story work. That's just the way it works, right? And sometimes it just takes more scenes to get to where you want to go. But this is him starting. This would be him at the beginning of the process. That's the way I like to do characters. I don't like to think of characters at the end. I like when I write and I tell stories to find that with the readers. And sometimes it's predictable because of the type of story you're telling, the type of archetypes you're choosing, but the actual details of how they change and why they change, that to me is the interesting part. And I like discovering that along with the people in the journey. So this is me. So I should be quite specific here. He's a chosen one, played as an everyman at the beginning of the story. As the story begins, the first part of the story where you're talking about how life is before the event that kicks off the actual adventure. The re-landing of a lizard person here would be that moment. Sort of like, which would be very akin to the Vikings landing at that monastery in England. I don't remember the name, with Ragnar Lothbrok supposedly raiding an English monastery. That changed England fundamentally forever. And so it's going to be that kind of event where it will be ugly. And it's a sea raid too. So it's very similar in that fashion too. I love the idea that there's a fog and then all of a sudden through the party frog, you start to see maybe the eyes glowing or something cool like that. But once again, I'm getting a bit off topic.
I don't mind that.
No, and we can't help it. We've learned
not. I don't mean
300 or so
off
episodes.
topic. I mean, I don't mind the idea that you were just describing.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. But you're offended at the off topic. Fair enough.
No. I'm fine with the off topic.
I was going to say, after 300 episodes, people should realize that I'm just not capable of.
What I think is funny is when we'll start an episode with the intention of it being A, and then we spend the entire episode talking about B.
Or C or D.
Yeah.
Yeah. So now we know who the character is, and once again, this is meta level. You don't need the details. You just need to know an idea, a framework that you can work on. That's all you're building here is your scaffolding for the character. We'll get to know the character better as we go on. We don't need to know all of his motivations. We're going to start learning some of the big picture stuff here, though. So the second thing I like to look at is what do they do? I think we just talked about that. He's a farmer. He's a grower of food. And frogs typically eat insects. I don't know if that's universal, but relatively universal, I guess. I don't know.
Well, yeah, but I mean, these are not regular frogs. These are, sentient bipedal frogs. Like they have an.
It's definitely not going to be the old school, like tongues whacking out at insects flying around because
there might be a little bit of that, but we also have been clear that they're islanders. So
and I'm a huge believer that fire is essential to the brain because it pre-processes food in a way that frees up energy to do things beyond consuming food. So they have to cook food, but that doesn't mean they don't have a little snack here on the side. A little old school nurturing food. But maybe they farm, like livestock. They've made some of the insects, they have an insect farm, a larvae farm. I don't know. but we'll figure that out later. But we're not building the race at this point. Where are they? They are on, or where is he? He is on a farm, not moisture farm, because this whole world is moisture. We'll call it a dirt farm.
The funny thing is, I know what you said, but it sounded like you said oyster farm.
That would make more sense.
That would make more sense.
But I said moisture farm because
I know what you said, but my brain
some people might
heard
argue
both things for me.
Skywalker
I was
wasn't
like,
chosen
that's
one
actually
character.
not a bad.
But the Force Awakens proves the entire time that was never the plan. But
the Force Awakens came out later, though.
No, but that was always the plan.
No, all right. I might not have heard you correctly. Which character did you say?
Luke Skywalker was the chosen one, but revealed later on in the Force Awakens that was really the plan.
That's retconning. You can't count that.
Oh, I can't count that.
No.
And I always think Luke is the savior of the universe.
Because all right, I'm taking an aside for this one because obviously what's real is what's first, and only for the amount of time that it exists until something else comes along. So when they made the original trilogy, that Luke was the savior. He was, the one that brought balance to the Force. But after making further movies, then it changes, right? Because they retcon it. So you can't say that, oh, well, we found out that wasn't the original plan. Well, it was the original plan until more was added and it was rewritten.
I think that's one of the big issues I have with people complain about retconning. It's not always retconning if you actually do it convincingly through the story. Now you can argue that was not an example of a good job of doing it, but I'd argue because you subvert expectations, if you actually do it correctly and don't just go, I said A, and then just start saying B, which is typically what happens in modern Hollywood. That's annoying, but you can do that kind of stuff correctly. But you know what? If you ever have a character as powerful and as loved as Luke and you screw with it, guess what you're going to do? You're going to annoy fans.
Yeah, you absolutely
including me.
are.
There's no way you could have done that well. Sorry. So they are on the farm on the island that's being invaded. So that is kind of the key thing, right? Is he's on a farm working on the island that's going to be invaded. Now, I don't know if he'll be involved in the initial attack. Probably not, because he's not ready. And typically, you don't kick your hero in the tush at the beginning. You let him start to get a bit of an ego. You kick him in the tush, and then he goes, "Oh crap! I have to really do it this other way." And we'll need some kind of wizard character for this too, in the classic sense of wizard, the sage to help him through on his journey.
Call him QC2.
Stop making stuff up. Okay.
Come on, you love that.
When do they do it? Now, this isn't super relevant for character building, but it's important to say this is at the beginning of the story. Because you might know, Michael and I, especially for important characters, really believe in dynamic characters. So this is all subject to be totally changed through the story. The story should take the character where their character needs to go. Because one, I don't believe in fate. So I won't write about fate, and maybe I'm wrong. In the real world, it doesn't matter because I believe I have free will. So my characters have free will to do what I tell them to. And they will be predestined chosen ones until they're not. And then everyone will hate me if the character is likable. But since this is like a frog, they probably won't like him. At the beginning, and at the beginning, once again, there's always an event in stories that start the story. You always have the little bit before there where you're showing how life is, and then there's some event that actually causes a story. Whether it's a conversation in a French art piece or it's a massive war epic in an American picture. There's always an event that turns into the story at the beginning of the story. And that's important too, because it's a very valid way to write, I think, where you sit there and go, this is how I want the character to end up, as an emotional wreck who is upset with the choices he's made in life. That would be a fair way to start off your character, but sit there and go, okay, he wasn't that way at the beginning. How was he at the beginning? And then you have to kind of, you have to create your character arc backwards. And it's typically easier to build stories and solve problems going backwards. How do they get it done? That's a really good question. I don't know if I know that for this character right now, because he's a farmer who is supposed to help protect his country, literally revolutionize his country and defeat an invading superior army. I don't know. I don't know if I can answer this question right now.
Well,
Michael, do you have any ideas?
Don't forget, we also have the artifact, which is a very big part of how we're going to pull all of this stuff together, which is a little bit of a MacGuffin, I'll give you, but
that's a very valid plot. It's Excalibur, right? It's not really, but yeah, it is.
I don't expect us to rely on it as heavily as so many other stories have, because we really want the character to have such a different cultural perspective that he literally changes their culture, right? Like he comes in and it's like, oh, this is the governing body, the religious, what did we call them? It was like the religious hierarchy, basically.
Yeah, the priest class.
The priest class, right. So they're in charge, right? But we come in and this guy is the chosen one, can wield their super artifact. And all of a sudden, he's the reason they start, winning this. I don't know if you want to call it a war, but they're trying to be conquered.
I think at the beginning it's going to be like heavily being raided by the Vikings, but you're headed towards the part where they're just like they're done and they're there for good. At the first it's scary and dangerous, but it builds up. I think how does he get it done? It's his journey reflected in the artifact. Because remember, one of the things you talk about with the artifact is that it has passed. It can follow based off of his choices. So it's his journey, his hero's journey, in conjunction with the artifact, because the artifact follows him in the journey. So if he decides to go the path of war, which is what the priests want, then the artifact goes with him and does become at that point like an Excalibur. Or he can go the farming, the growth route, to save the peoples, which is the way Michael and I want to do it. So I'm just going to say, how does he get done? Is the journey with the artifact, and why are they doing it? Desperation.
Well, also necessity. They don't want to get wiped out or lose their island,
Well, that's why I call it desperation. It's necessity to the extreme, right? Literally, if he does not succeed, they will become, as they
extinct.
Say, chattel at best, extinct over time. Because the problem is with these other people, they're not good at controlling their environments. They end up extincting the islands they're on, and that forces them to move on. So.
The thing, but also don't forget, we did make the thing where, we don't have to get into this detail.
We have to get into that. And remember, that's all subject to change at this point. That was ideas that got us going early on. And the real story is not yet formed. So, but they were all good ideas that we'll probably kind of stick with. So that's why I have to go back and re-listen to them.
Yeah.
Let's see. So, but
especially the artifact episode.
I think a lot of times the everymen aren't going to act in an epic story way unless they have to. They have to be forced in some way or another to do it. It's like the idea that I'm going to come off the farm and okay, all right, I've been a farmer all my life and I'm just going to go and I'm going to just lead the army to go defeat the bad guys. No farmer would think they're qualified to do that. They'd probably be afraid to leave their farm behind because who's going to take care of their family if they're not there to get the farm, to do the farm stuff, because you have to do farming at the farm to have food to feed your family. And typically in a more primitive society, missing a season or two could cause the extinction, of a family. So there you go. I think desperation here, and and I want to point out this is a true desperation, right? Because Michael and I have made the decision; these lizard people are here to eat them, literally.
Yeah.
So, it's an interesting story device to use where confusions, I think they're here to eat me, but they're not really here to eat me. Is a great story mechanic. Still read the Childhood's End from Arthur C. Clarke. Great story, kind of covering that idea. But read. It's a great way to do it too. But in here, we're being straight. We're not trying to. And here's the thing: is if we subvert it here and make the confusion there, and then later on you start making the confusion to try and make peace, you start breaking so many rules of the story that people are expecting. They're using up all their energy just keeping up there, and they might not make it to the end. So I believe that you have to distinguish yourself in the details and sometimes doing things in a different way. But the more you do that, the more brain energy people use up on that, and they might lose track of characters, they might lose track of plots and that kind of stuff. So where do you want the story to be? And here, I think we want the story fairly straightforward with some twist in there, but it just makes it more fun for me that way.
Here's my favorite kinds of stories that really pull me in and that also excite me in that they're not exactly the same as everything else I've seen. A lot of stuff by Joss Whedon, a lot of his older stuff. And the reason why is this. Joss Whedon is an expert at knowing what we're familiar with. All the tropes that we grew up with in television, he did too. So when we're watching a lot of his material, especially I'm going to Firefly, I'm looking at you, Buffy, I'm big time Buffy.
Like the real old school stuff.
Yeah. What they would do is you'd be like, oh, I've seen this character archetype before. Oh, I've seen this story before. There's plenty of episodes of Buffy that you're like, oh, I've seen literally probably 10 different television shows over the years that did this kind of episode where this type of character came in and this type of thing happened. So you're watching it and you're going, this is familiar. So you enjoy it. But then he knows just how to twist it in a way where you're like, oh, I wasn't expecting that. Yeah. So it is very approachable. It's familiar. This makes you feel comfortable and joyful.
And it makes the twist more impactful.
It makes the twist more impactful. But the fact that there is a twist, whereas a lot of TV shows, they just follow what worked the first time. They do the same trope again. And it's like, well.
And what really works with his storytelling too, and I know there's some issues with his personality at this point, and I don't know anything about that, and that's whatever. This is him as an artist, and the thing is that what's smart is he's oftentimes will just follow tropes through. So you're never sure if this is the one that's going to deviate or not. Is it going to be an episode deviation? Is it going to be a season arc deviation? Is it going to be just a character deviation where the character acts in a way and kicks the person through an engine deviation? That's the thing that was brilliant too, was he had many tropes that would lace his stories, and most of them would give you what you expected. And so he was very good at picking ones to subvert that really, at least for me, were like, wow, that was cool. Like, the whole Mao kicking the guy in the engine made me go, holy shit. Because I was thinking up to that point, Han Solo, he proved to me at that point he was not Han Solo, even though the studio kind of said, no, you're going to go Han Solo. But that's okay. Sometimes you have to deal with the real world too. So.
Well, yeah, because they pay for it.
They pay for it. Unfortunately, they didn't pay enough.
Yeah.
But I'm going to just start whining about that again. I'm going to stop right now. But yeah, so desperation gets them going. Now I'm going to get a little bit into the extended meta stuff, the stuff that the character also we want to know just a little bit more. And this is like functional stuff. It's not really stuff about the character, but one is the character dynamic or static. This is a protagonist character. I don't think I could do a static character as a protagonist. That would
because we're also talking about, getting back to tropes, we're also talking about a hero's journey, right? So just by definition, he's going to be changing.
Mm-hmm. So, and in general, as a story consumer, I love dynamic characters. And now, to the depth of the character, is he flat or round? The idea is this is a Judy Blume concept. And a flat character. A flat character is a character who's pretty much, they might change throughout the story, like what they're doing, but their personality doesn't really change. You know, the depth of it, there's no real depth to the character. They're a shallow character, like Shallow Hal would be a flat character. A round character would be, any character that Michael has ever played in a role-playing game. So many nuances that they don't make sense at a point.
Well, to you, I'm very complicated.
It is very complicated, and which makes Michael a fun player, actually. I tease him in jest. But a round character is just, it's really complicated. And it's not necessarily, good or evil. It's just the mechanisms for their decision making is really complicated, and sometimes they seem confusing because wouldn't they make the same decision they did before? Well, no, because this one other variant has now changed, so they've shifted from X to Y to Z to R to V. So there's the pathing sequence in a tree decision making scenario is massive, where a round character will have almost a binary choice at every curve. So they're dynamic and they make changes based off of that, but they're just shallow. And the neat thing is a dynamic character could be flat, but they're usually not. And a static character is typically flat, but can be round. They can be a very complicated character, but they don't really change through the story at all. They have, a complicated way of making decisions. So that's the interesting thing. Thank you, Judy Blume. And she's a master author, I guess. I've never heard of her before. I'm lying. She's I guess a middle-aged kind of author. Very popular when I was a kid. I don't know if she still is or not.
I would imagine she still is.
Yeah. Who is the character connected to? His people. And he's probably from a farming community. Probably doesn't know many people beyond that. He's connected indirectly to the society, but typically he's going to be a rural bumpkin, I think, in the sense of this kind of a society, which he's the least sophisticated among the people. He's the commoner's commoner, but he's going to be connected. He needs a wizard character, and this is very important for any hero's journey. Your Obi-Wan. Your Odin, the character who aids you to find the correct path to the conclusion of the story. And they're called wizard characters because traditionally they're wizards. Gandalf would be this character. Merlin would be this character. I'm still not sure how much of a party, if one he has, I don't know. I like parties. I like a bit more of an ensemble a little bit, so there probably will be. But I think it's not many people he starts off the story with. It's a little bit more Luke Skywalker. Maybe not murdered-wise, but he'll leave the farm and all of those people behind. And he will move out into a new life, but he'll acquire friends along the way, definitely. And one will probably be a lizard person. And it won't be a Darth Vader moment unless I can make it work, because it would be strange if the lizard was the frog's father.
That would be a lot strange.
And I also guarantee he will not have romantic kisses with any siblings. But how are they connected?
I'm not ruling it out.
How are they connected? They're going to be connected because of the circumstances of this massive war going on. And they're connected out of, once again, desperation and necessity. Because ultimately, the lizard person who turns isn't turning to help the frogs. He's turning to save his people. Because he's going to realize, much like the frog people are starting down the wrong path, his people have been going down the wrong path. And he's trying to save his people as well, too. So, he's a hero, but he's in it for not just to be a good guy. He just is a good guy because he's on the right side. And now that's it. So, we kind of went over the basic meta questions of a character. We don't know a lot of details yet outside of ideas that we've had. Because you notice, whenever you go through this process, Michael and I will throw out ideas because they come to you when you think about this big picture stuff.
Yeah.
And it's okay to write them down, or else, like me and Michael later on, you're like, we had these cool ideas. What were they?
Exactly. But we did write them down, though. We do have them. We just don't have them right in front of us, which was maybe our folly.
Yeah, which is the folly of us and the way we operate here. But the really awesome thing is, it's like, if you're not getting sparks of inspiration as you go through here, you're making the wrong choices. That's how you know you're making the wrong choices. It's not wrong to make him the chosen one. It's not wrong to make him a classic Superman kind of hero, whatever you want to do. The thing is, if you don't get any sparks of inspiration when you make the choices, that's when you should probably reconsider. Maybe I'm making the wrong choice on the character archetype because I don't get any feelings from that of where I want to go with the character. If you don't get any feelings of where you want to go, you either don't know enough about the archetype, and you need to go look at the archetype and understand it better, or if you really understand the archetype, maybe it just isn't interesting to you. And trust me, I tried to write in a story genre that I thought I liked because I like to consume it, but when I started to write it, I got bored and I did not like it. And
so I've talked about this before, so I want to go back right where you just said maybe you're choosing the wrong thing. I don't want to say it's the wrong thing. But what I do want to say is focus on what inspires you. So there are plenty of times where we're like, okay, I'm going to sit down and I'm going to write X thing. You start writing it and you realize that either you don't know as much about it as you thought, or you don't have as many good ideas about it as you thought, or this is more frustratingly common, I find, you actually don't like it as much as you originally wanted. And that moment, I want you to realize that moment is your key to a breakthrough. When you find yourself right there, consider what is inspiring you. Like sometimes you'd be like, oh, I'm going to write, this science fiction story. But in the process of it, you come up with a thriller maybe, and you're like, oh, what would be intriguing if this dynamic was here and that dynamic was there, but it doesn't really fit in what I'm trying to write. Okay, so maybe you sideboard that and go with what is actually inspiring. Maybe you write a thriller
that's set in a futuristic setting.
There are plenty of success stories out there in technology fields, in creative fields, in all kinds of fields where somebody just zigged because one thing wasn't working and they discovered something else was working better. So be open to that, because that can be a big breakthrough moment when you're like, I'm bored or I'm uninspired, but I've got this other thing that is nagging in my brain and I just can't let it go. Run with that thing.
And I love writing epic stories. It's like, I think Michael was in parts of a game I ran a storyline for years. So it's awesome for me. I love these kind of story types. Other people, it's like, okay, I'm starting to build a hero's journey kind of thing here, and it's going to be this big, huge war epic that has politics and all kinds of crap going on into it, and I'm getting bored with it. So let me turn it into a political thriller where the farmer, at the point where the story begins, instead of going down the hero's journey, ends up maybe trying to escape and report on the evil priests, and that becomes like a classic Grisham kind of thriller, So you can, and that's a cool way to subvert expectations too, where it's like you feel like this big war epic's coming, but it's not really that. It's really the story of this guy who realizes the corruption of his society and needs to get the correct news out so the people can save themselves. And is just trying to survive long enough to do it. Maybe he gets a cell phone that makes a strange beeping sound and it's 24 hours to do it. Who knows?
For a great example of this and a really fun, fast read, pick up Eve Forward's Villains by Necessity. Great book. Might be difficult to get the book itself, but I believe you can get it digitally pretty easily, I think. So hopefully I'm not recommending something to you guys that is difficult to track down, but Eve Forward's Villains by Necessity is great with this, where she does all these zigzags and with familiar tropes. So you're like, oh yeah, this is, I think I know what's going to happen. And then you really don't. She does some really funny, and it's a very funny book too.
Yeah. Okay. It saves on Audible. Good for my outdoor walking time. Okay.
So that's a real world task. You got a world builder task?
My world builder task is build a frog race for your world. You need one. Make it a vicious tree frog race that attacks people in their garages.
I like that. I like that. Vicious tree frog race. Super cute.
Huge fangs.
Super
deadly. Those are bunnies.
Ooh, sharp, pointy teeth. He's
and
a
actually,
killer.
The original real world task was you need to go out and read the Little Blue Truck.
Oh, there you go. Just add that to the bin. And if you're going to get these things from Amazon, go to www.garduel.com/Amazon. That will help the show out. It's not going to change your prices, but it will put a smile on our faces.
Yes. It's fun because they have this little smile thing. So. Oh, see you next week, folks. All right.
Thank you so much for listening to the World Builders Anvil.
We would love it if you would share the World Builders Anvil with 2 of your friends.
And so would they.
If they are unfamiliar with podcasts, then you get to introduce them to the wonderful world of podcasting.
Take them to Stitcher or iTunes, or best of all, just send them to our website, www.garduel.com.
That's GARDUL.com.
Now strike while the mithril's hot.